Imagine standing at the center of the world. Not metaphorically, literally. A place where the flight paths of 6 continents converge. Where the departure board reads like a geography lesson. Where, at any given hour of the day, tens of thousands of people are either arriving, connecting, or preparing to leave for somewhere else entirely. For years, Dubai International Airport was exactly that place. The pivot point, the layover capital, the connector between East and West that somehow made the journey feel like a destination in itself. But something quietly may be starting to shift. Not dramatically, not with headlines or crises, but in the way that important changes often happen, slowly, structurally, and beneath the surface of the numbers that look at first glance perfectly fine. This is not a story about an airport failing. Dubai International remains one of the busiest airports on Earth, and few serious analysts would argue otherwise. But in aviation, as in most things, the question is rarely whether something is still standing. The question is whether it is still the strongest version of itself, and whether the forces gathering around it are ones it can absorb without cost. That is what this video is about. Because when you look past the gleaming terminals and the relentless passenger counts, a more complicated picture begins to form. One shaped by infrastructure limits, changing airline strategies, regional competition, and a global aviation landscape that has never been more crowded with ambition. Dubai International Airport, known by its IATA code DXB, built its dominance on a specific model. Volume, connectivity, and the hub-and-spoke philosophy taken to an almost extreme conclusion. Emirates Airline, its anchor carrier, became one of the most recognizable brands in global aviation, and the airport became, in many ways, an extension of that brand. Transiting through Dubai felt premium. It felt efficient. It felt like the smart choice. But models, no matter how successful, eventually face pressure. And the pressures gathering around DXB are worth understanding. Not because they spell some kind of collapse, but because they reveal something important about how aviation power actually shifts and how slowly a dominant position can begin to erode before anyone says it out loud. The first pressure point is one that travelers don't always see, but feel, and it is the pressure of physical limits. Dubai International Airport was not designed to carry the load it currently carries. Its 2 terminals, its runways, its transit corridors, all of them were built for a different era of growth. Over time, as passenger numbers climbed year after year, the airport has had to absorb more demand within a footprint that has not expanded at the same pace. What this creates is a subtler problem than an empty terminal or a closed gate. It creates a congestion dynamic, not always visible in marketing materials, but increasingly visible in connection times, gate availability, and the kind of experience that frequent flyers discuss quietly among themselves. When an airport is running near its practical capacity ceiling for extended periods, efficiency begins to fray at the edges. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. And for an airport whose entire value proposition is built on being a seamless transit hub, a place where you arrive from one continent and board another flight with minimal friction, any erosion of that seamlessness begins to matter quite a lot. The deeper issue may be that Dubai International is approaching a ceiling it cannot simply build its way out of. Unlike some airports that have land and room to expand, DXB sits within an increasingly dense urban environment. The options are not unlimited, but that may only be part of the story. Because while Dubai International has been pressing against its physical limits, something else has been taking shape just a few kilometers away, and it changes the conversation entirely. Al Maktoum International Airport, sometimes referred to as Dubai World Central, has been under development for years. It carries extraordinary ambitions. When fully realized, it has been positioned as a facility that could eventually handle passenger volumes that would make it one of the largest airports ever built. The existence of this project is, in one sense, a solution. It is the answer to DXB's congestion problem, a relief valve, a new chapter. But in another sense, it raises its own set of questions. Large-scale airport infrastructure projects are among the most complex and time-sensitive undertakings in the world. They require airline buy-in, route migration, terminal readiness, and traveler behavioral shifts that do not happen quickly or smoothly. The transition from one hub to another, even within the same city, is not a simple logistical exercise. For now, DXB carries the burden of being both the present and the future simultaneously. It must perform at a world-class level today, while the successor facility continues to develop in the background. That is not an easy position for any major hub to sustain indefinitely. And the timing of that transition matters enormously for airlines, for travelers, and for Dubai's broader aviation strategy. And this is where the comparison starts to matter. Because Dubai International does not operate in a vacuum. It operates in a region that has, over the past decade, become one of the most competitive aviation landscapes on the planet. Doha's Hamad International Airport has undergone a significant expansion and has positioned itself as a credible alternative hub, backed by Qatar Airways, which is consistently ranked among the world's top airlines. The experience at Hamad, its architecture, its transit facilities, its connection efficiency, is one that many travelers now place alongside, or for some, ahead of Dubai in their mental ranking of preferred layover airports. Abu Dhabi is developing its own major airport infrastructure project. Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in aviation capacity, with ambitions that extend well beyond regional connectivity. Istanbul's new airport has emerged as a major intercontinental hub with its own powerful geographic logic, sitting at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. What this regional and global competition means is that Dubai International's position as the default choice for long-haul connections is increasingly challenged, not by any single rival, but by a field of rivals that is growing more capable with each passing year. The advantage DXB once held was not just about geography. It was about being significantly ahead of the alternatives. When the alternatives were weaker, the choice was obvious. As the alternatives strengthen, the choice becomes a calculation, and calculations, unlike habits, are easier to revise. What makes this more interesting is the role of Emirates Airline in this dynamic. Emirates built its model around DXB. The relationship between the carrier and the hub is so intertwined that it is difficult to discuss one without the other. Emirates' growth drove DXB growth. Emirates' route network made DXB relevant to cities that would otherwise have had little reason to connect there. But the airline, like the airport, faces its own set of pressures. Global fleet availability, fuel costs, competitive pricing from carriers operating on leaner models, and the rise of alternative carriers, some of them backed by significant sovereign investment, all create headwinds that were less significant a decade ago. When airport success is as closely tied to a single anchor carrier as DXB's is to Emirates, the health of that carrier becomes part of the airport story, not in terms of crisis, but in terms of trajectory. Any period of recalibration for the airline has downstream effects for the hub. Any route change, any capacity adjustment, any strategic pivot creates ripples that the airport absorbs. This is not unique to Dubai. Many of the world's great hubs are similarly anchor dependent, but it is worth understanding as part of the pressure picture. There's also a quieter, less structural pressure that is harder to quantify, but maybe just as meaningful in the long run, and it has to do with traveler perception. For many years, transiting through Dubai carried a certain sense of prestige. The airport was associated with a particular brand of modernity and ambition. The duty-free was expansive. The lounges were competitive. The transit experience felt, if not effortless, then at least impressive. Perception, however, is not static. It is shaped by cumulative experience, by comparison, and by the stories that frequent travelers share with each other. As alternative hubs have upgraded their own experiences, and as DXB has had to manage increasing passenger loads through fixed infrastructure, some of the shine may be showing wear. This is perhaps the softest pressure point of all. But in aviation, where loyalty is a habit and habit is shaped by experience, is not a trivial one. A traveler who chooses Doha over Dubai once and finds the experience satisfying may default to Doha again. The first affection is the most significant. For some visitors and transit passengers, Dubai International no longer carries that quality of inevitability it once had. It is still a strong choice. But the phrase "still a strong choice" is different from the obvious choice, and that difference, aggregated across millions of individual decisions, is what changes a hub's position over time. It is worth pausing here to say something clearly. Dubai International Airport is not in crisis. It handles enormous passenger volumes. It remains deeply connected to one of the world's most ambitious aviation ecosystems. The UAE government has demonstrated consistently a willingness to invest in infrastructure and adapt strategy when conditions require it. The transition to Al Maktoum, however challenging, represents a genuine long-term plan, not an absence of thinking. And Emirates, whatever its near-term pressures, remains a carrier with global reach and a recognizable brand that still commands respect in the industry. But the question this video has been circling is not whether DXB is finished. It is whether DXB is at an inflection point, a moment where the pressures of capacity, competition, transition, and perception are converging in ways that require more than incremental adjustment. And the honest answer, based on what can be observed, is that the answer appears to be yes. The deepest lesson in all of this may not be about airports at all. It may be about how dominance in any complex system carries within it the seeds of its own greatest challenge. Dubai International became so central, so load-bearing, so integral to the Emirates model and the UAE's aviation identity, that managing its evolution has become one of the most consequential infrastructure challenges in the region. The very success of the hub created the congestion that now limits it. The very ambition that drove that success is now being channeled into a successor facility that must be brought online carefully, strategically, and in coordination with an airline and an airline ecosystem that has built its entire logic around the current hub. Perhaps the real shift is not in whether Dubai International is a great airport. It still is. The shift may be in how travelers, airlines, and planners are beginning to think about what comes next, and what role DXB plays in a future that is being built, right now, a few kilometers away. The runway ahead is not closed, but it is more complicated than it once appeared. If you were planning a long-haul journey today and had a genuine choice of hub, would Dubai International still be your first instinct? Or has the calculation started to feel more open? Leave your answer below. The conversation is worth having. This video is based on publicly discussed trends, observable industry dynamics, and interpretive analysis. It is not intended as a definitive factual claim about any airport, airline, or government entity, and viewers are encouraged to consult current sources for the latest developments.